Hello everyone! Our first information about Natlan is finally here, and Kinich is one of the 3 new Natlan characters coming out in patch 5.0. He's looking to be a top tier Dendro carry who has a very unique and mobile gameplay style, both in and out of combat. His kit seems to mainly focus around either burning or version, but depending on translation inconsistencies, Kinich may be an even more universal Dendro carry. So with that, let's get right into explaining his initial kit. As always, remember that this is very early information, so very subject to change. Before we talk about the kit, we must first talk about Nightsoul. Nightsoul is the special mechanic for all character kits of Natlan. All of their kits play around the Nightsoul mechanic, whether in or out of combat. Nightsoul also is required for the new Natlan artifact sets you will be using. So what does Nightsoul do? Nightsoul has 3 main features. First is Nightsoul Burst. All this does is that when you have Natlan characters on your team, whenever a Natlan character does elemental damage, this effect will trigger. The more Natlan characters you have on your team, the shorter the trigger interval. From what I've seen, just one Natlan character is enough to trigger this. Next is Nightsoul Blessing. This is the main effect of Nightsoul for Natlan characters, where the characters enter a special enhanced state to deal the majority of their damage. While in this enhanced state, the Natlan characters gain a special Nightsoul gauge where they can accumulate and spend Nightsoul points for extra damage, or just extend the duration of their enhanced state depending on the character. What Nightsoul Blessing does is unique for each Natlan character, so you'll have to look into their specific kits to know how it affects the character. The last aspect of Nightsoul is Nightsoul Transmission. This is an exploration feature. The Nightsoul enhanced states for each Natlan character can be used in the overworld for faster traveling. Nightsoul Transmission basically allows you to stay in the state longer and can unlock special exploration movement abilities while exploring the specific areas of Natlan. With a proper understanding of Nightsoul, let's talk about Kinich. Kinich is a 5-star Dendro Claymore user that ascends with crit damage. His base stats are shown here. He is an on-field Dendro main DPS that benefits from the burning and burgeon reactions, but again this could be opened up depending on translation inconsistencies, which I will point out later. Although he is just another main DPS, what makes his gameplay unique is his mobility in and out of combat, a feature that seems to be a trend for all these upcoming Natlan characters. With that, let's go into his skills. Here are the numbers on his normal talent. The one interesting thing to me here is that Kinich can perform one mid-air normal attack when launching himself with his skill, but other than that, you don't actually use Kinich's normal attack, so you can ignore this. Next, Kinich's elemental skill, which is the majority of his kit. Out of combat, his skill is a grappling hook with a reduced cooldown, so you can swing around. You can hold down the skill to aim it. If there is an enemy nearby, his grappling hook will target the enemy instead, activating Nightsoul Blessing with 0 Nightsoul points. If you played League of Legends before, then the best way to describe and visualize his gameplay is Akshan attacking enemies while he's spinning around. However, instead of latching onto walls, Kinich attaches onto one enemy. Once Kinich's grappling hook is attached to an enemy and he's in his enhanced state, he will circle around the enemy. The Nightsoul Blessing state lasts 10 seconds and Kinich will gain 2 Nightsoul points every second. The max amount of points he can hold is 20. While circling around, if you use a normal attack, he will shoot the enemy twice, dealing Dendro damage and gain 3 Nightsoul points. Once Kinich has 20 Nightsoul points, which you will know because there will be a visual gauge that fills up, Kinich can use his elemental skill to shoot a cannon shot that deals a lot of damage. Afterwards, he'll continue circling the enemy. With Kinich's A4, the damage of his cannon shot will be increased by 320% attack once he gains 2 stacks of Hunter's experience, which is gained through triggering Nightsoul Burst. Remember that Nightsoul Burst is triggered when a Natlan character deals elemental damage. From my current knowledge, Kinich himself can activate this passive, but we'll have to see for confirmation. Both this cannon shot and the normal attacks you can perform while swinging are considered elemental skill damage. So in summary, Kinich latches onto an enemy with a skill and circles around the enemy. You normal attack while circling around to gain Nightsoul points, and once the gauge is full, you can use this skill to shoot out a nuke of damage. Then you repeat until the enhanced state is over. Pretty simple. There are 2 additional ways that Kinich can gain Nightsoul points. First, when Kinich grapples onto an enemy or fires his cannon, he creates a field called a dead zone. When he enters it, he gets 4 points, so a pretty automatic thing. The other way is through his A1 passive. When Kinich hits an enemy via his skill, the enemy enters the desolation state. When burning or burgeon is triggered on this enemy, Kinich gains 7 Nightsoul points. This is a lot of points, and more points means more cannon shots, which means more damage. This is the reason Kinich is designed around burning and burgeon. However, I mentioned something about a translation inconsistency. If you translate this description from the CN text, it says that it can be a burning or blooming reaction. If this is the case, then Kinich isn't just locked to burning and burgeon teams, but he can also be played in bloom and hyper bloom teams. We will know which translation is correct in the upcoming weeks. The last part of his base kit is his burst, which is pretty simple. Kinich summons a jaw to rain fire onto his enemies. It just does damage, and it works similarly to Navia's burst, so you can switch out and it will continually deal damage. This is a great source of AoE damage since Kinich's grapple gameplay is single target oriented. If you use Kinich's burst while he's in the Nightsoul blessing, the enhanced state gets extended by 2 seconds. With the animation time of his burst, however, it doesn't really change much about his uptime, so you'll probably just burst after your Nightsoul blessing uptime and swap out. Lastly, the special passive talent. It seems like the special passive talent for all Natlan characters is purely exploration based. There are a lot of unfamiliar terms which we'll probably learn as we explore in 5.0, but the gist of it is that while exploring in Natlan, you can enter Nightsoul blessing more for exploration by triggering Nightsoul transmission, and you can unlock some special movement abilities while interacting with special mechanisms in Natlan. And that is Kinich's base kit in a nutshell. Talent priority is simple, skill over burst. My idea of a general gameplay rotation is support setup, then switch to Kinich, circle around the enemy with the grappling hook where you normal attack and skill once the gauge is full until the enhanced state is over, then you can burst if you have it and loop back to your supports. Next, let's cover his Constellations. C1 gives his cannon shot 90% crit damage, so a pretty big damage increase. It also gives Kinich movement speed after he lands from using his grappling hook, so nice exploration buff. C2 allows Kinich to shred Dendro res when his attacks during his elemental skill hits enemies. In addition, the first cannon shot he fires deals more damage and has larger AoE. C3 increases the skill talent level by 3. C4 gives extra energy whenever Kinich attacks during the Nightsoul blessing state every 2.8 seconds. C5 increases burst talent by 3, and C6 gives Kinich's cannon shots the ability to bounce between enemies, dealing even more damage. Now let's cover Kinich's potential builds. His signature will be his best in slot, nice base attack and crit rate substat, and the special passive pretty much gives 60% damage bonus to Kinich's skill and burst since he fully stacks it with the elemental skill hits. Now again, the English description says that you can gain extra stacks when the party triggers burning or bursion, but the CN text says blooming instead of bursion, so we'll have to wait and see which is correct. Other 5-star weapons that give good damage stats are good. One that looks really nice to me is Beacon. For 4-star weapons, as always, Serpent Spine is the best for damage focused Claymore users. Crit rate and crit damage is just too good to pass up. For free to play options, the Melazine Claymore is fine because of the attack percent, but the one option that looks made for Kinich is the new Natlan craftable Claymore, as it gives attack and elemental skill damage. It does require triggering pyro related reactions, so this would only be best in burning and bursion teams, which coincides with the English description. For artifact sets, there really is only one option, and it's the new Natlan DPS set, Obsidian Codex. This set is only for characters utilizing the Nightsoul mechanic, aka only Natlan characters, and if you're a Natlan character, you'll basically gain all the effects, so 20% damage bonus on the 2-piece and 40% crit rate on the 4-piece. Very strong artifact set. Sure, you can use something like Deepwood or 2-piece temporarily on 5.0 launch, but you should be planning to farm and use this new set. For artifact stats, Kinich is a standard DPS, so attack hourglass, Dendro goblet, crit circlet. Prioritize crit, then attack, then ER for substats. EM will only be useful if the CN translation is correct and he can be used in specifically Nilou Bloom. As for ER, we are unsure about his particle generation at the moment. I would not focus on it personally since the majority of Kinich's damage is from his elemental skill, but having some ER in substats is perfectly fine for comfort. His burst does do a decent amount of damage. Lastly, let's cover his potential team comps. Going by the English description, his 2 team options are Burning and Bursion. For Burning, the best team will be Kinich, Emily, Xiangling, and Bennett. Tomor for Xiangling is a possibility, however I don't think it's confirmed whether Kinich's normal attacks while he's spinning around can activate things like Toma's burst. Dea will for sure work though as defensive utility. If you don't have Emily, you can use Nahida or any other Dendro, or use it as a flex slot like Zhongli. For Bursion, all you need to do is replace the second Dendro slot for a Hydro character. Again, I'm unsure whether Yalan or Xingqiu burst will activate with Kinich, so you might be forced to run units like Farina, Kokomi, and Siegeween as your Hydro unit. Power units will pretty much be the same. You can kinda see that Xiangling is the best option for damage and off-field application, but her presence also forces the usage of Bennett, so in a way, Xiangling is limiting Kinich's team comps. However, in a world where there is a better option for off-field pyro application that isn't as energy intensive, let's just say maybe the Pyro Archon, Kinich's teams will get a lot better. Now if the CN translation is the correct version, and just general Bloom reactions can proc Kinich's A1 passive, then Kinich can be played in teams like Nilou Bloom and Hyper Bloom. These teams will look similar to existing Nilou Bloom and Hyper Bloom teams, with Kinich taking one of the Dendro slots, and I expect him to be pretty good in these teams as well. However, like I said, this may or may not be correct, and we'll have to wait and see in the upcoming weeks to know whether Kinich can actually be played in these teams. And that's everything I wanted to cover about Kinich. As a Dendro main DPS, his biggest competition is Alhaitham, widely considered one of the best DPSs in this game. However, Kinich is focused on burning and bursion teams, while Alhaitham dominates in Hyperbloom and spread teams, so the 2 DPSs do fulfill different niches as they play in different Dendro team compositions. This may change if translations are fixed, but this makes the most sense to me since we don't really have burning or burgeon focused on-field main main DPSs yet in Genshin, and from some early calculations I've seen on Kinich, his teams look quite good. He's just a strong DPS with some nice multipliers. Keep in mind that with his current team options, no one is buffing Kinich with the new Natlan support set that gives 45% damage bonus. Once new teams are introduced that can fit this in, such as potentially the Pyro Archon, the damage of his teams will increase. But even at the current moment without these buffs, his team damage is looking very solid and top tier, which is very promising for him as a new Dendro main DPS. But aside from damage numbers, his gameplay looks very fun with his mobility, so I can't wait to see how HOYOMiX will update his kit in the upcoming weeks. I hope this initial overview and analysis on Kinich's kit was helpful to y'all. Feel free to leave any questions in the comments and I'll try to clarify anything, and drop the video a like or sub to the channel if you like this type of content. I also recently made a new Discord server, so if you want to ask me any more specific questions, feel free to join and chill. And with that, I hope you all are excited about what Natlan has to offer.